For years, Bubba Watson looked like the kind of story golf was supposed to protect. He was the self-taught outsider from Baghdad, Florida. The left-hander with the violent swing. The man who could bend a golf ball around trees as if the laws of physics were only suggestions. He did not arrive with a polished academy background. He learned by hitting plastic balls around his childhood home. He built a swing that instructors would never design, then used it to win at the most traditional place in golf, Augusta National. In 2012, from the pine straw on the second playoff hole, Watson struck a 155-yard hook around the trees and onto the green. It was not the safe shot. It was not the textbook shot. It was the only shot he could see. Minutes later, he was wearing the green jacket. He cried. The audience saw a champion who still looked surprised by his own life. A new father. A devoted husband. A man of faith. A golfer who spoke about adoption as something larger than trophies. His son Caleb had entered the family only weeks before the Masters victory. The impossible shot became part of the image. Bubba was not manufactured. Bubba was real. And when he won the Masters again in 2014, the story appeared complete. The first victory had not been luck. The strange swing was legitimate. The emotions were legitimate. The family image was legitimate. Golf had found a hero who did not look like the others. But the people who knew him inside the ropes had already seen another version. In 2015, ESPN surveyed 103 PGA Tour players and asked which fellow player they would be least likely to help in a fight. Bubba Watson received more votes than anyone else. 22.5. More than twice the total of the next player. Watson did not attack the survey. He did not deny that something was wrong. At Augusta, he said he needed to improve as a man. It was a brief answer, but it opened a much larger question. How could one of golf's most emotional and marketable champions become one of its least trusted colleagues? What had the public missed? What had the cameras captured, then forgotten? And why did every apology seem to close the file before anyone examined the pattern? This is not the criminal case. There is no public evidence proving that Bubba Watson committed some hidden offense. There is no court judgment. No formal accusation of fraud. No secret verdict waiting to be revealed. What remains is not a verdict. It is a timeline. And the timeline begins before the green jackets. In the early years, Watson's unpredictability was treated as part of the attraction. He played quickly. He reacted visibly. He heard everything. A noise in the crowd. A comment from outside the ropes. A question he did not like. A shot that refused to obey. The same sensitivity that helped him imagine impossible golf shots also appeared to make ordinary pressure feel personal. In 2011, that tension followed him to France. At the French Open, Watson complained about security, crowds, and distractions. His interviews created further damage. When asked about landmarks he had visited, he referred to the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe in vague, clumsy terms that were widely mocked. The incident was not serious misconduct, but it exposed something important. A global athlete had entered another country and appeared irritated by the experience around him. The joke spread. The criticism grew. By the time Watson arrived at the Open Championship, he issued a broad apology to France. The apology worked. The story faded. Nobody treated it as a warning. Then came Augusta. The 2012 Masters changed the scale of everything. Before the green jacket, Watson could be described as difficult, emotional, or immature. After the green jacket, those same traits could be repackaged as authenticity. His temper became passion. His discomfort became vulnerability. His refusal to conform became independence. This is how public images become durable. They do not erase the difficult parts. They rename them, and Bubba's image had powerful protection. There was the pink driver and the charity work. There was the family story. There was the open faith. There was the enormous distance off the tee and the childlike imagination in the air. There was also television. Television did not need Bubba Watson to be calm. It needed him to be watchable. He was. But in June 2013, at the Travelers Championship, the microphone caught a different exchange. Watson hit his tee shot into the water on the 16th hole. He then directed his frustration toward his caddy, Ted Scott. After another shot went long, the criticism continued. The moment was public. The hierarchy was obvious. The player had the name, the money, and the microphone. The caddy carried the bag. Afterwards, Scott took responsibility for the club selection. He said he had convinced Watson to hit the wrong club. Watson later described it as a team error. The explanation ended the immediate controversy. But it also created another question. Why was the employee protecting the star?
Perhaps Scott genuinely believed the mistake was his.
Perhaps this was simply how a close professional partnership worked. There is no public evidence proving coercion. Scott remained with Watson for years. Together they won 12 PGA Tour events, including 2 Masters titles. When they eventually separated in 2021, both men described the split as mutual, and Watson continued to call Scott a close friend. Those facts matter. But the television footage mattered too. Because viewers had seen the instinct. Under pressure, blame moved outward. And then the story disappeared. In 2014, Watson won again. The second Masters title restored the beautiful version of the story. He was no one-hit miracle. He had become one of the defining golfers of his generation.
Later that year in Shanghai, he produced another spectacular finish to win the WGC HSBC Champions.
An eagle from a bunker. A playoff victory. More evidence that his imagination could rescue him from places where conventional players would fail. Yet during the same closing stretch, reports noted Watson angrily reacting to external noise after a poor tee shot. The contradiction was becoming familiar. Brilliance, frustration, recovery, forgiveness. The result was usually memorable enough to erase the behavior that came before it. Then, in 2015, the private opinion of the locker room became public.
The anonymous player survey did not accuse Watson of a crime.
It did not prove every player disliked him. It did not explain the motives behind every vote. But the margin was difficult to ignore. The public saw an emotional family man. A significant group of his peers saw someone they would not rush to defend. Watson's response was unusually direct. He said he needed to improve. For a moment, the image and the criticism occupied the same frame. Then golf moved on. That same year, another symbol returned to the story. Watson owned one of the original General Lee cars from the Dukes of Hazzard, with a Confederate flag painted on its roof. After the 2015 Charleston church shooting intensified the national debate around Confederate imagery, Watson announced that he would replace the flag with the American flag. What is confirmed is that he chose to remove the symbol. There is no public evidence that ownership of the car proved racist intent. Watson did not defend the Confederate flag, but the episode showed how quickly a nostalgic object could become a reputational liability. Once again, the response was correction. Once again, the image survived. In early 2016, the conflict moved back to the course. Before the Phoenix Open, Watson said he did not like the redesign of TPC Scottsdale and suggested he was playing the event largely because of obligations connected to sponsors. The crowd responded with boos.
Watson later apologized for his choice of words. He said the course criticism had been expressed poorly. He also suggested the media had amplified or distorted the meaning.
This was not a major scandal, but it fit the rhythm. A blunt statement, a negative reaction, an apology, a claim of misunderstanding. Then silence. The same cycle can look harmless when each incident is isolated. Placed together, it becomes harder to dismiss. France, the caddy, the anonymous survey, Phoenix, external noise, public correction, private irritation. The pattern was not criminality. It was friction. A famous man repeatedly struggling with the people, environments, and expectations surrounding him. And for years, the easiest explanation was personality. Bubba was sensitive. Bubba was different. Bubba was Bubba. Then the body began to expose what the image had hidden. By 2017, Watson's weight had fallen dramatically. He later said anxiety and stress had taken control of him. At 6 feet 3 inches, he dropped to roughly 162 pounds. He believed at times that he might die. This changed the meaning of some earlier moments. The anger could no longer be viewed only as arrogance. The crowd discomfort could no longer be treated only as entitlement. Watson eventually spoke publicly about anxiety, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, and the feeling of being judged in social situations. He acknowledged that he had resisted professional help. He described years of internal pressure that had affected his health and nearly pushed him away from golf. These were not excuses. They were context. And context complicates a clean prosecution. A person can be responsible for how he treats others and still be suffering. A public figure can create pain and also experience it. The two facts can exist together. In 2018, Watson returned to elite form. He won 3 times on the PGA Tour. The comeback was presented as athletic recovery, but beneath it was something less visible. A man learning that the threat was not always outside the ropes. Years later, he became more open. He discussed mental health. He wrote about fear. He admitted weakness. For many observers, this looked like growth, and there is evidence supporting that interpretation. Former colleagues have also described moments of kindness. Watson reached out to younger players. He spoke with Matthew Wolff during Wolff's own struggles. After Brooks Koepka publicly criticized Wolff in 2023, Watson later brought Wolff to the Range Goats, offering a new team and a different environment. That does not erase the old footage, but it prevents the timeline from becoming propaganda. Bubba Watson was never only the man shouting at a caddy. He was also the man who maintained a 15-year partnership with that caddy. He was never only the player mocked in France. He was also the player who apologized. He was never only the colleague named in an anonymous survey. He was also the man who publicly accepted that he needed to change. The question is not whether redemption was possible. The question is why the same tension kept returning. In 2021, Watson and Ted Scott ended their on-course partnership. The announcement was warm. Watson credited Scott with helping him succeed and grow. There was no public accusation of mistreatment from Scott. The split was described as mutual. Watson later said his wrist injury and uncertainty about the future played a role, while Scott still wanted many more years of work. Soon afterward, Scott began caddying for Scottie Scheffler. Then the results arrived. Another Masters. More major championships. A historic run. For some viewers, Scott's success reopened the old Travelers footage. Not as proof that Watson had held him back. There is no evidence proving that. Caddies and players separate for many reasons. But the visual contrast was powerful. The man once seen absorbing blame beside Bubba Watson was now being celebrated beside another champion. Years later, the old clip had new weight. Not as proof, as a pattern. Then came the decision that changed Watson's place in professional golf. In April 2022, reports connected him to the Saudi-backed LIV Golf project. Watson responded publicly by posting a schedule filled with PGA Tour events. It was not a formal denial, but many readers understood the message. 3 months later, he joined LIV. He could not play immediately because of a torn meniscus, so he entered as a non-playing captain. He later resigned from the PGA Tour and built a new identity around the Range Goats team. The move was legal. It was a business decision. There is no public evidence that Watson violated a criminal law by joining LIV. Like other players, he accepted an offer from a league financed by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. Critics accused the league of helping Saudi Arabia improve its international image. LIV and its players emphasized competition, opportunity, global expansion, and a new model for professional golf. Watson did not disclose every financial detail publicly, and that absence mattered, because his public identity had long depended on sincerity. The self-taught golfer, the family man, the man who said trophies would disappear but people would remain. Now, he was entering the most polarizing money conflict golf had seen in generations. The question was not simply whether he had the right to take the deal. He did. The deeper question was what happened when authenticity became an asset in a commercial war. LIV did not recruit only Watson's golf swing. It recruited his story. The pink driver, the 2 green jackets, the tears, the outsider credibility, the belief that Bubba could not be manufactured. That is the real value of a public image. It can be converted into sponsorship, into loyalty, into legitimacy, into protection. Watson became a captain, a spokesman, a business operator. The man who once resisted systems now led one. And the contradictions continued. He supported LIV while criticizing parts of it. In 2026, after the league expanded events from 54 to 72 holes, Watson said he preferred the shorter format because it created tighter, more chaotic finishes for fans. It was a notable position. LIV's move toward 72 holes was widely understood as part of its effort to gain greater legitimacy, including recognition in the world ranking system. Watson wanted the rebellion to remain different, but he also wanted access to the institutions the rebellion had challenged. That is not necessarily hypocrisy. It may simply be the reality of modern sports. Everyone wants independence. Everyone also wants recognition. The outsider wants the gates removed. Then he wants the old house to acknowledge him. By 2025, Watson had produced his best LIV season, including a runner-up finish in the United Kingdom. In 2026, the Range Goats retained their roster, including Matthew Wolff. The official language emphasized chemistry, health, and collective belief. That is the current image. Not the angry young player. Not the mocked tourist. Not the champion screaming at his caddy. A veteran captain. A mental health advocate. A father. A businessman. A man still capable of producing impossible shots. The file does not end with collapse. That may be the most uncomfortable part. There is no clean ending. No final exposure. No single event that proves the beautiful image was false. Instead, there are two Bubba Watsons moving through the same timeline. One is generous, vulnerable, and imaginative. The other is reactive, controlling, and wounded by criticism. One speaks openly about fear. The other turns pressure outward. One builds a career by refusing instruction. The other repeatedly discovers that independence has a cost. Perhaps the public protected him because the good parts were real. Perhaps colleagues kept their distance because the difficult parts were real too. This is how reputation actually works. It is not a mask covering the truth. It is a negotiation between competing truths. The master's shot was real. The tears were real. The adoption story was real. The caddy footage was real. The apologies were real. The survey was real. The anxiety was real. The LIV contract was real. None of these facts cancels the others. They accumulate, and when they accumulate, the question changes. It is no longer, was Bubba Watson a hero or a villain? That question is too easy. The harder question is why sports needs either answer. Golf did not merely celebrate Watson because he won. It created a usable version of him. The gifted outsider. The emotional father. The uncoached genius. A man whose flaws could be presented as evidence of authenticity because his talent made the entire package profitable. When the behavior became uncomfortable, an apology restored the image. When the image weakened, another impossible shot revived it. When the career slowed, vulnerability offered a new form of connection. When the old tour lost its control, LIV purchased the value that remained. This does not mean the emotions were fake. It means real emotion can still become a product. And a product is protected as long as it continues to work. That may explain why the warning in 2015 disappeared so quickly. The players who shared fairways with Watson were asked a hypothetical question. Who would they be least likely to help in a fight? They answered. The public heard the result. Watson admitted he needed to improve. Then Augusta began. The cameras turned toward the azaleas. The story moved on, but the warning did not vanish. It waited inside the timeline. Years later, it sounds different. Not because it proves guilt, not because it exposes a hidden crime, because it came from the people standing closest. Maybe Bubba Watson really did change. Maybe the captain, father, and mental health advocate is the fullest version of the man. Or maybe public images do not disappear when they break. They are repaired, rebranded, and sold again. The warning was never a verdict. It was only a vote. But sometimes, the quietest vote is the one that follows a man for the rest of his life.